Hello everyone. In this short video, I will showcase how we animated the characters in the text during the title sequence that we were working on last night. For this, I have already pre-trimmed a clip, and I'm going to use only about 2 seconds worth of the footage that I brought in. And my goal is to create a text that moves along with the camera, and it also shakes just like the water choppiness that you see here in the surface of the river. Now for this, I'm going to use the thin font that we were using last night. This is one of the fonts that we've downloaded from the Adobe fonts site. And I make sure that my paragraph is centered so that I know that whenever I start at the center of the screen, I will go ahead and be creating my title there. So let me choose the text tool. I'll click somewhere in the center of the screen, and I already have pre-written my text for this title. And I will be setting up that as soon as I'm done with that text, I'll be setting it up somewhere midway in the middle of the live area. So with that done, what I want to do is I want to do two things. The first thing is I want to track this rectangle, this square up here. I'm going to make sure that I track it and then add that tracking motion to the text. And then I'll apply that jumpiness to the text. So the first thing to do is track that rectangle. So I'll select the clip that I want to, or the layer that I want to track. Then I'll make sure that I go to my navigation. Either I go window tracker if it's not available, or I'll go to the right hand side where I have it. And then I'll be tracking motion. For this, I only need to track that rectangle, which means I don't need to track rotation or scale. And since I've already reviewed the footage and I know that this is just footage of the camera panning to the left, all I need to do is track that one point. So I'll go ahead and move my tracker point to be on top of that rectangle, and I'll resize to fit a little bit more of my margin of error in the actual area. Since this is a pretty well defined visual, I know my tracker will do a good job by simply using the default tracking, by analyzing forward, by letting the computer do its thing. So with that done, I am going to go into options under the tracker, and I'm going to make sure that I have enhance before match enable. This will slow down my track, but it will make sure that it enhances every frame to make sure that I am capturing what I intend to capture, what I intend to track. So remember that it'll slow down your tracking, but it will, if you don't have clarity within what you're trying to track, then it will help you to do a better track. I'll also track luminance, or I can actually, in this case, track, since I have a well-defined red and there's no change in the light, that's going to be tracked as RGB. So I'll choose whichever one of the options, whichever one of the channels I want to track. I'll just keep it under luminance, and I'll click OK for now. With that done, I'm going to click analyze, and you see that the tracker is tracking my artwork and goes across with it, and we are done. So now that I have tracked, I can see that if I select my layer and press the U key, I have all those keyframes for tracking that tracking information. What we did in class is what the regular workflow for this is to apply that tracking information to an actual null object, or to a target layer. In our case, our target layer is the text layer. So if I go and I say edit target here, I will see a selection of layers that I might have available within a composition. In this case, since I only have the two, the only one that's available to me is the title. So if I click OK on that, what's going to happen, and then I click apply. So I selected the target, the text to be the target, and then I'll click apply. It's going to ask me, do you want to apply this on X and Y? X only or Y only? So I'll say X and Y because that's what I want. So if I do this, notice that my text moves and positions itself right next to where that tracker was. Now let's say that's not what I wanted. I wanted the text to remain in the center of the screen. So you have options. You can go ahead and change the anchor point on the layer to move it up or down, or left and right, as we had done before. That's option 1. So that's one way to do it, and you could easily just go ahead and move it down and sort of place it. But let's assume for just, let me undo that, and let's assume for just a second that your intent, you had already preset the text where you wanted it, but you still want the text to follow the motion of the camera that we just tracked. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you can always create a null object, and this null object will be your tracking data. So you can call that track data, and not data, and then assign the animation, the tracking information to the track data. So let's to that null object. So let's say, select the layer back, the one that we tracked, and make sure that you choose which which tracker do you have. Did I go one step too far? No, I did not. So let me go back to the tracking options, and let's go ahead and choose the layer that we applied the tracker to under the tracker, and then go back and edit your target. So click edit target, and instead of it being the actual title, use the track data null object. With that done, click OK, and the process becomes the same. You simply apply, click to X and Y, and click OK, and you're done. Now your null object is there. You see that red rectangle here? That is your null object, and it's tracking the position of that other piece of art on the bridge. But my title is not moving. So all I need to do now is make my title a child of the track data layer, and then it will move with that null object. So with that done, we move on to actually doing the animation on the text. For that, remember, After Effects has a very powerful text engine that comes standard with it. And what that means for you is you have a lot of properties that you can animate independently of the actual properties of the layer when it comes to either text or graphics. So if you create not graphics that you import, but actual graphics that you create in here. So if you are trying to animate, create animators, which are those properties that you add on top of the properties that come with the standard layers, you'd need to have either text or an actual shape. That's the word, a shape that you create within the program. So let me go ahead and select the text tool, and I'll uncollapse it to reveal the text and the transformation options. Then I'll go under text, and you'll notice that the text has both path and what they call more options. And more options are regarding how this text responds to any changes, whether it is by character or by the options that you have by default on any font, which are fill and outline or stroke. So with that said, let me go ahead, and I want to actually create animators to animate each one of those characters independently. And so what I want to do is I want to create an animator for position, and then attach other properties to it. So with that said, let me go ahead and select the layer, select the text option, and click on animate right next to text, and then I'll be adding a position animator. When I do that, you'll notice that I create a new animator, and it has a range selector attached to it, which is, as I explained in class, how far from the beginning to the end of the whatever characters you have that selection cover. Anything that I'm doing, how much does it cover? Does it go from 0 to 100%? Or do I want it only to go halfway through the characters? Or do I want to start somewhere and not affect the beginning characters, and maybe move the endpoint downstream to not affect the ending characters? So you have the option to control that, the range of how much this affects what you're about to do. So let's focus first on the position. And to that animator, I don't want to create another animator. So if you want to add more properties to that animator, go to the add option and add them from that area. In this case, I want to do rotation. So I have both position and rotation under animator 1. If I wanted to add more animators, I would have to go back to text and select under animate, and then go ahead and keep on adding animators as you see fit for whatever properties you want. But in this case, I want both animators both of these changes under the same animator, because I want to control both of them with the same expression. And so to do so, I want to first apply a couple of changes. So I'm going to change the position of these guys by about 2 pixels. And I'm going to change the rotation by about 2 degrees as well. So it's not a significant amount of change, but with the expression that I want to attach to this animator, which is the wiggler, I'll go ahead and click add, and then under that I'll go to the selector option and choose wiggly. What that does is it applies an expression on the back engine to say these values will change based on however many wiggles we want to change per second. So if I scrub, you'll see that my text sort of moves ever so slightly, but the actual characters are moving, rotating and moving at the same time. Okay, let me turn off the background layer so you actually can see how this moves. So it's not that they're just simply sliding, they are also moving in place. They're rotating and moving out of position. If you want to emphasize this a little bit, if you want to make it more evident, you can always go under the wiggly selector option and you can change the amount of wiggle influence. You can also change how many wiggles per second you want this to have. You can change basically all of these different options for how the wiggler works. You can change all of that. So let me do a quick render on this, and you'll notice that the text is basically moving up and down. If I want to increase that, I can always go to increase the wiggles per second to, let's say, 10. I want to make it a little bit more evident, and you'll see how much choppier the text is going to get. Perhaps that is the animation that you're going for. So let me go ahead and turn on the visibility on the video again, zoom to 100%, and play this back again. Maybe that is the style for the text that you're looking for. Now, if you want to, right now, all of my characters have their anchor point based at the bottom because, as I explained in class, every character has its by default in the font, the actual point of reference for the text comes at the bottom of the characters. If I want to change the anchor point for that, if I want these things to rotate from the center, I need to go under more options, and then I need to change the group alignment. Once I move that, you'll notice that you get these little red X's. Those red X's are the actual anchor points or the pivot points for your characters. And you'll notice that as I move them either up or down on the y-axis, they go up or down. With that changed, when I do this, when I do the preview again, my characters will be rotating around the center, which might be a little bit easier, from a legibility perspective. So this might be what you're looking for when you're creating those animations. The last thing with these animations is, let's say you've worked a lot to try to create those animations and set them up properly. You spent a lot of time trying to create this. You might want to save that as an animation. An animation preset. So if you want to do that, you can always go ahead and go into the actual animation that you have created and select the animator or animators that you have applied. Select just that, not the text, but the actual animators. And with that selected, you can always go back, select it, and go to animation drop down up at the top. Then go to save animation preset, and then you can give it a name. In this case, I'm going to rename it. As I had done this before, I'm going to rename it Shaky Text 2, and I'm going to click save. It's going to save over it, and I'll say yes, that's fine. And what this does for you is that if you've already got the animation down to what you want it to do, you can always go back in future compositions. You can go ahead and create a new composition, for example, and you can create another text layer, and then simply selecting that layer, you can go to animation, apply animation preset, and then you look for the actual animation that you had just saved or that you saved a long time ago, and then click open. And what that's going to do is it's going to apply the animation the way you had created it for the other composition. This saves you a lot of work if you're working on, let's say, title sequences and you're actually animating each title independently. Repeating animation presets help you save a lot of time. I hope this answers the question and clarifies how it was that we animated text during class time.